Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August meeting of Rochester Xamarin. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. This is our first meeting back from what I'm calling summer break. This is the well, this year has been all kind of first for us. For those that aren't familiar with our history, we tried starting the user group up in 2018 and didn't really work out, and then so we started it again beginning of this year, and I think May was our last session, and then I got really busy during the summer months, so it's probably going to be a thing we're going to be doing in the summers is take a break and then pick it back up towards the end of the summer again. So good news is I got people scheduled from now until December, so we'll have lots of content coming up for the rest of 2019. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank our sponsors of the. Is my slide deck not updating for you guys? Doesn't work good. Is it still showing the main slide?
Yep, it is.
Yep.
Okay. That's a problem. Let's try this again. All right. How about now? Sponsors?
Yeah, we see that.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, cool. I stopped hosting this for a couple months and I forgot how to work PowerPoint. So our sponsors, .NET Foundation helps us out with getting more people involved in our user group and covering costs for meetup and stuff. So always got to give a big shout out to the .NET Foundation. I want to go through some announcements before we talk with have our presenter go through and do their thing. So over the summer, a lot of stuff happened, and I wanted to highlight a couple of the things that I kind of caught from the summer. It's not a full inclusive list, but it's a lot of things that I saw with some conferences, big announcements, and more conferences. So let's go through some links. I should be sharing that, Teams. So Xamarin Dev Summit happened earlier this year, and I'll post all of these links in the chat once I go through all of them, and they'll be available on the YouTube video for anyone watching afterwards. But Xamarin Dev Summit was a really great conference. If you had an opportunity to go out there, anyone on the phone actually make it out to Xamarin Dev Summit?
Yep.
How was it?
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah, I concur with that. Awesome.
I was hoping to make it out this year, but I had a wedding to go to. But there was a lot of great announcements that happened in it, like Xamarin Hot Reload and such. And I believe they're starting to be planning the next one. I haven't heard any news about the next one. But one of the big announcements that came out of it was Xamarin Hot Reload, where this is a feature that's been requested by the community for quite some time, of being able to edit your XAML and have it just show up on the device right away. And I've been using it in the private preview, and then they just announced the public preview this week, actually. So you can go and get it if you weren't invited and start using it. It's been saving me a lot of time in my development, and I'm excited that the team's been so receptive on if you find problems. When I was using Hot Reload, I found a couple problems in my app, and I contacted Maddie from the Xamarin team. And the next thing I knew, I was in a phone call with her and the rest of the Hot Reload team. It wasn't just her. I think there was 5 of us in the room, and I was showing them what was going on. Like, oh yeah, we can fix this. And so if you do run into problems, let them know. Another thing that was announced was the Android AOT or Android tracing for faster startup times. I'm not sure the shortest way to say that, but startup times are going to be faster on Android with a flip of a button. It's using ahead of time compilation with Mono to, once your app is installed on your on the device, it'll be able to compile the assemblies and then load them faster. And the performance improvements that they're seeing here is, they're seeing a couple seconds, pretty depending on the size of the app. So that's pretty good in my opinion. One of the things to note is your APK size does go up slightly, not as fully as if you do full AOT, like in this second result. It's almost double, but it goes up, 4 megs, about 4 megs, and using startup tracing, the example they have here, and it's something that's the Xamarin team's helping out with, trying to make our apps load faster. I'm excited to give this one a try. As far as events and conferences, like we were talking earlier, coming up, not this Saturday, but next Saturday in Toronto is Xamarin Saturday. And I don't know how they got so many talented speakers to show up, but it's a free event in Toronto. And if you're able to make it out there, I would check it out. They have the schedule available now, and there's going to be a Xamarin.Forms workshop alongside several hour-long breakout sessions. And they got people from the Xamarin team and all very talented people that are going there. I'm also going to be there speaking as well. I don't know how I got on the list to speak. I really don't. When I saw all the speakers come out, I thought, wow, there's some really smart people here. So I'm excited to be going out there. And if you are ready to go out, I highly recommend it. I also heard from Dylan and Daniel, who are the people putting it on, that there is going to be live streaming for it. I don't know a lot of details about it yet, but that's going to be a thing they're doing. And if you follow me on Twitter, I'll be posting about it once I know about it. And the last thing I wanted to chat about was Xamarin.Forms 4.2 preview has been out. The third release has been out. They're getting ready to ship the 4.2 the version 4.2. The thing that I've been noticing a lot in the release notes is they're spending a lot of time on the collection view that they're in, and the associated features that go along with it, which have been really powerful for building all sorts of different, the future of list view stuff. If you want to do like side scrolling displays or carousel views, has been really cool with it. And one of the things that I'm excited about for 4.2, if I can get to it. Where is it? It's in there. There's a font image source extension markup. So the new font image the new font image utility they have in Xamarin.Forms, there's a markup extension out there that allows you to kind of do it all in line. And let me just look one more time quickly. Where is it? Here it is. So instead of having really verbose XAML like that, it simplifies it to a markup extension. And that's my personal shout out for something that I did, which I was excited that made it in. All right. Let me go back to the slide deck here. Those were announcements. And today, we're joined by Danny Ackerman, who is going to be giving us an overview of Fody using Xamarin.Forms. So without any further ado, I'm going to make him presenter and give him everything he needs.
Thank you, Andrew. Let me know if that, here, Chrome tab. Okay, cool. Well, first thing, I've always known it as Fody, but I don't know, maybe I'm saying it wrong all this time.
I don't know. I've called it Fody.
We should get that cleared up. I'm going to contact the author and find out. All right, thank you so much for having me. I'll just give my quick background, and then I will just get straight to my content. So my name is Danny Ackerman. I am a senior software engineer at a company called Intent Media in New York City. I do mostly front end, but I'm also a full stack engineer, and I try to get my hands dirty with back end stuff whenever I can. I've been doing Xamarin for about 2 years now. I've made a couple different apps, but the thing I've been working on most of the time that I've been doing Xamarin is a very large app for my volunteer ambulance service, where I've been the director of technology as well as a volunteer EMT for the last 10 years. So this app is used by about 1,000 volunteer EMTs and paramedics and has all kinds of information about hospitals and contacting the dispatchers with live updates and drug reference and all kinds of other things. So I've had a great experience using Xamarin so far, Xamarin.Forms. I'm by no means an expert on anything. I always constantly worry about suffering from imposter syndrome. So when Andrew said, "Do you want to present?" I said, "Sure, but I'm not an expert on anything." And he said, "No, just talk about your experience in Fody." And I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." So yeah, that's my background. I think that was sufficient. Anything else I should cover?
No.
Okay,
Go
cool.
and go right ahead.
All right.
I love the app that you're building though, because it's so cool what people use Xamarin to build, how they use Xamarin to help other people.
Yep, absolutely. And it's amazing that we, have this framework that so many of us who are like solely .NET devs and not, Objective-C or Java, and now it's kind of given us this empowerment to build apps. So it's been amazing. All right, so Fody in Xamarin.Forms. So my background, I covered that. I should have just gone straight to the slides. So I'm not going to assume, Andrew said, don't assume any knowledge on the part of anyone. So I'll just give a quick background. Why use Xamarin.Forms? It is an amazing framework that allows you to develop mobile apps using C#. You can share a single code base across iOS and Android. There's nothing to customize except like bundle identifiers and icons and whatever little settings you need for each platform. But 95% of what you do is write it once and it runs on both platforms. C# itself is an awesome language. As we all know, it's amazing to be able to write apps in C#. And you get the logical code reuse. So if you're a .NET shop in general, then you can take a lot of your business logic and components that you've written for other systems and just drop them into your app, and they just magically work. So that's just amazing for a lot of folks. So let's just dive straight into, again, not assuming anything, and please correct me if I'm wrong at any point along the way. I definitely tried to make sure that I have a good understanding and conveying a good understanding of the way things work, but I am by no means infallible. So the basics are, when you have an app, you have a view, and most of the time you don't just have that view sitting there doing nothing, you have a view model. And the view model sitting behind it is probably instantiating a model of some sort. So that's where you get the MVVM model view model. And the way that those two connect to each other is through data binding. So let's just look at a simple static view. This is the view that you get when you first start up a new Xamarin.Forms project. So you've got your content page, a simple stack layout, and a label with static text that says, "Welcome to Xamarin.Forms." So you can see the code on the left produces the screenshot on the right. So now what we're going to do is take this view and bind it to a view model. So you can see here in the highlighted line, there's a binding context. And the binding context tells the page, either through XAML or through code behind, what you want to bind your view to. So in this case, I have a view model locator. And the view model locator is a static class that when you say, "Can you give me main page view model," which is a property on that class, it returns a new instance of my view model, which is called main page view model. So this is a kind of a poor man's IOC and container, but that's obviously a whole other world and a whole separate topic. So
Danny,
yeah, go ahead.
For those that aren't aware, can you just in one or two sentences describe what a view model locator is?
Sure. So a view model locator, it doesn't have to be called view model locator. I always, try to make sure that when I'm reading things, I obsess over whether or not something has to be named a certain way or it has to be structured a certain way. A view model locator is just a concept where you have a class, a static class, and you will get back from that class instances of your view models. So generally, the view model locator will have all the code that will new up or return the singleton instance of your view model. If that view model is shared across multiple pages, you don't want to new up separate versions for each page necessarily. So the view model locator will handle instantiating it, returning that instance to you, and so on. Did that help answer the question?
Oh, perfect.
Awesome. Okay. So if you can see, it's probably hard to see the line numbers, but if you see at line 13, we've changed our label text from a static message, welcome to Xamarin.Forms, to, in curly braces, binding welcome message. So the curly braces tell the code that we're doing something special in here. Binding is the keyword to say, okay, I'm going to take something from the view model, a property on the view model, and I'm going to stick it in here. So you're binding to a property of the view model, and that property has to be public, and it has to be accessible because the view is a separate class from the view model. So it's not like they are magically one class together. So if it's not a public property, the view won't be able to see it. So as we'll see in the next page, welcome message is a property on our view model. So see that I talk ahead of myself when I have this stuff nicely highlighted. So anyways, you can see there that I've got the binding context with the view model locator, and I've got the binding text to the welcome message. All right, so now let's get interactive. So instead of static text, let's see some interactivity, which can only come when using a binding. Let's see if this video will play. Here we go. Oh, wait, was that? Oh, here we go. Okay. So you can see here that I now have an entry field in my view, and I have a label above that, and they are both bound to the same public property of my view model. So I've switched from binding to welcome message, and I'm now binding to something called user entry. So I'm going to play that for you again. So they're both bound to the same property. So I would think, oh, if I just edit the entry field, it'll update the label because they both have the same what we call backing field. And if I'm editing one, then the other one should be reflected, but it's not. And that's where we'll get into INotifyPropertyChanged and where Fody comes into play to help us out here. Any questions on that video or anything else so far? Okay. So here's my view model in its entirety. This is main page view model. And we're not going to show the code for the view model locator that instantiates this, but this is what gets instantiated. So we have a private property, a private string called underscore user entry, and it says hello world. And that's why when we start up the view, they both say hello world when you launch the app. And then we have the public field called user entry. And we have a getter and a setter. So when you are getting user entry, we're returning the private field, and we're setting it. We're setting the field to the value that the user enters. Perfect. So in order for a view to update a binding with a new value, your view model class, which is just a class, needs to implement something called INotifyPropertyChanged. And INotifyPropertyChanged is an interface with a single event. And that event is property changed. And it's a mechanism to notify any what we'll call subscribers that a change has taken place and that they need to update themselves. And this is what allows the data binding to actually work. What we'll actually call two-way data binding. If you didn't want the information in your class to update the view, you actually don't need this. It's only necessary in order for you to be able to change data in the view model and have it update in the view. That's the only time where you need the INotifyPropertyChanged and Fody and kind of a two-way data binding. So let's look at another video. So now we're going to see we've added INotifyPropertyChanged to our class, and now you can see when we're editing the entry field, the label is magically updating along with it. So let's look at that again, just in case anybody missed it. On the left, you can see main page view model now has INotifyPropertyChanged. We've implemented the interface, so we have a public event called PropertyChanged event handler. And down below in the setter, we are calling that event PropertyChanged, and we're passing in PropertyChanged event args, and we're telling it what field, what property of the class actually got updated. And it uses that to notify subscribers to that field. And if you remember in our view, we have a subscriber to that that text. Well, it's in the video, but it's the text of the label is binding to that, as well as the entry. So here's the class, here's the view model. Now that we've added INotifyPropertyChanged, you can take a look at it. As I said, we added the interface, we added the property-changed event, and we are calling the event when we are setting the value of user entry. So what would this look like with a bunch of properties? Your view models are likely not to be one property or only two properties. So this is what you will very quickly run into when, and this is a very sad state of affairs, as you can see, and maybe some of you even have classes and view models that look like this, and if so, you know, it works, but it's definitely not the most readable code in the world. So we're going to try to change that. We're going to get out of this sad state and move to a happier state. So this is where Fody comes in. So Fody is this amazing open source library that adds a lot of magic to our classes. I think this could be considered syntactic sugar, but I'm not exactly sure. But basically, it's code that is injected at compile time. I know I wrote runtime there, but it's compile time. So Fody has a bunch of different what are called weavers, and all these different weavers they make light work of all the repetitive things that you need to add to your classes. So whether it's, you know, adding attributes for logging or adding boilerplate code for threading or whatever the case may be, there's a ton of different what we call these weavers, these like add-ins for Fody, and I recommend checking them out. The one we're going to talk about today is called the property changed weaver. So over here, I took this screenshot from the Fody property changed GitHub repo. So as you can see, the before code at the top, they have the INotifyPropertyChanged, and they have just 3 properties: the given names, family name, and full name. But what actually gets compiled, you can see, has getters and setters for each property, and it's calling on property changed for you. So it's doing a lot of the boilerplate code behind the scenes at compile time, and that you don't even need to worry about. It all happens magically behind the scenes. So now let's take a look at what our code looks like with property change added. So as you can see on the right in the video, it still behaves the same way. When you type into the entry field, the label gets updated. But if you look at the code on the left, and I'll just play this again. Actually, I have it over here. All I did was to my view model, and I didn't even add the interface. I added an attribute at the top called add INotifyPropertyChanged interface, and I think the attribute at the end isn't necessary. You could do it either way. All I have is a public property user entry. I don't have the private property anymore. I've got empty getters and setters, and I have a default value of hello world. That's it. And with that, with add INotifyPropertyChanged behind the scenes, Fody is going to go ahead and add in the INotifyPropertyChanged interface. It's going to add in the event for property changed. It's going to add private and getters and setters for each of my properties, and it's going to call the property changed event for me as necessary when these properties change. So it takes a ton of code away from you having to write it. And so the benefits of Fody are much cleaner code, much easier to read, and much less to maintain. So there are some additional attributes that I didn't write the code for. So we talked about the add INotifyPropertyChanged. If you don't use add INotifyPropertyChanged, but you simply implement the INotifyPropertyChanged, then Fody can still take care of implementing the logic for you. There's also these 2 attributes, also notify for and do not notify. So also notify for is useful. Let's say you've got 2 properties, last name and first name, and those display together in a view and let's say a label. So you could say that for each one of those, so for the first name, you can say also notify for the last name. And for the last name, you can say also notify for the first name. So what that does is when either one gets updated, both of them will get updated in your view if there's bindings to those properties. And do not notify, as you can imagine, does the opposite. It will not notify you for any changes to those properties. So if you don't want to get notified, if you don't want your view to get updated for those properties, then you can add that, because obviously Fody is going to go ahead and add that magic boilerplate code to every single property in your class unless you explicitly say that it shouldn't. So that's about it. I know it's probably a lot faster than I think what we were expecting, but I wanted to just get straight into the point and not clutter it with anything extra. So does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I got some questions for you.
Sure.
Can we go back a couple slides where you have that attribute?
Right here?
Yeah. So I've never used this. I've read the GitHub, and that's about it. So shame on me for never using it. But so if I'm understanding this correctly, then we can. Do you need? I guess. So if you don't use that attribute there and it doesn't implement INotifyPropertyChanged, Fody does nothing, right?
Correct. Yep.
So now, if it does implement INotifyPropertyChanged and you don't use the attribute, Fody will go through and grab every property and try and do the thing with it, right?
I'm all positive it does. It's funny because I did this, and I did it with the INotifyPropertyChanged, and I'm almost positive that that's how it worked. And then I wrote the code with the attribute. But yes, because I'm pretty sure in my my main app, I only do this once in my base view model, and all I'm doing is there implementing. It's actually on my views, on my on my models that I have that attribute. So yeah, it's the easiest way to go. But yeah, I'm fairly certain if you just have INotifyPropertyChanged, it's still going to add in all of the backing for you.
Okay, because the reason why I'm asking this is I'm thinking you got a lot of different libraries out there, you know, MVVM Lite, Prism, MVVM Cross. They all have, for the most part, INotifyPropertyChanged already implemented. And if you wanted to try this out on your project, you know, you use that library, and since those base view models already implement it, it should just work, which is cool.
Yes. So yes, and just don't forget the one catch here to remember is it's not just your view model. It's also necessary for it to be on your models. So if you are instantiating a model inside of your view model to use inside of your view, the model also has to implement INotifyPropertyChanged if you want it to do two-way data binding. So if you want it to update with changes that the user might be making to those fields inside of the view.
Right, and that, like a good example of that would be if you have a list, a complicated data template for a list view that binds to like first name, last name, you know, street address or something. You know, with when those updated, you wanted to make sure that that particular model of like person class would have the add INotifyPropertyChanged interface attribute on it.
Yep, exactly.
Very cool. That's all my questions. Does anyone have any questions for Danny? Going once. Going twice. No? Okay. Hey, Raul, are you trying? I can't hear you. I see your name.
Yeah, I was just about to talk. Yeah, so I don't have any question per se, but if I may, I have one or two things that may be important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've been using Fody for a while, and one thing that I came across that is not very easy to notice is that it only works with after properties. So if you implement in this case, for example, if you define the getter and setter for the user entry, Fody stops working, because as Danny said, if it implements it for you, but if it finds out an implementation is already there, then it just doesn't do anything. And another thing is, Danny told us that we must implement the the tag. It's too long to just tell it again. So if you have to implement the tag for the models as well, if you have the models on your remodel and you want the two-way binding, right? So that's true. That's true if the case is for if you want to change the properties, if you want to listen for change on the properties of the models. But if you are going to change the instance, for example, of the view model inside the view model, then just the view model is enough, because it listens for the change of the property inside the view model. Then in this case is an instance of the model, and in that particular case it would work. So that's it. Otherwise, great talk, Danny.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's good to know. And yeah, definitely I missed that on the first one. Yes, if you implement your own getter and setter for a property, then Fody won't go ahead and change that, because it'll assume that you have special code that you want to be doing inside of that setter.
Exactly.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, those are really great points. That's something I've always I run into problems like, oh, where do I need that notify property change? Did I update the whole object, or am I updating just a property on it? All right. Anyone else got any questions for Danny, or any comments they want to add for the talk? No? All right. I'm going to take presenter back then. Let's all give Danny a nice big round of applause. Thanks for coming and doing the talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm going to embarrass him a little bit. This was his first presentation at a user group, and it's always nerve-wracking to get up, even virtually, to talk in front of people. So this was, don't feel bad that it was 30 minutes. I told you 30 minutes to 90 minutes is what we do here. So 30 minutes, you did fine. You did great, actually. So this is a good overview of the topic. And thanks for coming for that. So before everyone leaves, let me just pull up my slide deck again. So we met Danny. He talked about Fody. So if you guys are interested in more Xamarin Online, we have a good relationship with our friends from the TorontoMobile.net developers user group, and they stream their user group on Twitch and YouTube, or at least I think they're still doing YouTube, or maybe they stopped doing Twitch, one of the two. Anyways, they have their next meetup is going to be on August 20th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and they're going over setting up your Xamarin development environment next, which will be an exciting one to. It's always exciting to go see what they have to show off. And if you want to wait until next time, our next meeting is going to be September 11th, and again, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and we have Raul presenting. Is that how you pronounce it, Raul?
Yeah, that's okay. About it.
All right, he's going to be presenting on MVVM apps using Prism library. So we'll have, like I said at the beginning, we're back from our summer break, and I got people booked up through December right now. And if you want to get your name on the list to present starting December, January, get a hold of me and I can put you on the list. Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks again, Danny, for doing the presentation.
Thank you. Have a great night.